because the Christmas decorations are up.
Oh,
This is being
Um,
recorded.
no.
On Saturday Night Live, it's
All right, so
Yeah,
we
right.
just got a chance to watch Coming Back Together for
Yeah,
James.
right.
no,
Also, end of the book for us.
more recent.
Begin to talk about what we're going to do next at the end of
Oh,
and we listened to a song by a guy named Jelly Rolls. Say it's called
I
Need a
could take a
Favor.
bath tonight in my very own tub.
To it
Oh,
and
okay.
a lot of the videos that we watch. And I think I chose that, which I'll mention why when we're all done, because I think it really has a message for the end of the book of James. All right, so let's hit the ground running. Let's run with 5 to, let's just run 5-1 to 5. Let's see, 5-6. How about that? 5-1 to 5-6. Who would like to read?
I'll read it.
Okay, you go.
Look here, you rich people, weep and groan with anguish because of all the terrible troubles ahead of you. Your wealth is rotting away, and your fine clothes are moth-eaten rags. Your gold and silver are corroded. The very wealth you were counting on will eat away your flesh like fire. This corroded treasure you have hoarded will testify against you on the day of judgment. For listen, hear the cries of the field workers whom you have cheated of their pay. The cries of those who harvest your fields have reached the ears of the Lord of heaven's armies. You have spent your years on earth in luxury, satisfying your every desire. You fatten yourselves for the day of slaughter. You have condemned and killed innocent people who do not resist you. Very dramatic.
Very dramatic. Oh yeah, James does not pull the punches on the 5th chapter. He's really going to pull it tight. So I love that part of your translation. What translation are you reading?
My wacky one, NLT.
Okay, it's wacky, but it's got a couple lines in there that are absolutely spot on compared to my NIV, which is not spot on. So that is really cool. All right, so anybody want to take a dive, see what we got here? What hit you? What'd you hear? Anything surprising?
He's talking about the worthlessness of riches.
Yeah, pretty hard, pretty pointed in his condemnation. So now you may remember in chapter 4, the real culmination of chapter 4 is a complete dependence on God. It's demanding a complete dependence, and with a notification that bad things are going to happen. Earlier we have in Corinthians, we have the statement by Paul that we are destined to be persecuted, and Jesus says the same thing. They're going to persecute you because of me. So if you talk about me, you bring me up, you're my herald, you're going to be persecuted. He says they're going to pull you before the authorities and all that other stuff. So Paul just echoes that in Corinthians, saying the same thing. So there is a risk. There's a risk to the witness, and the risk to the witness is if I did not only the physical reality, but if I depend upon myself and my own strength and my own will, I won't make it. I'll renegotiate. I'll renege on the deal. I'll go back and say, "Oh, I didn't mean it," because we want to be safe. We want to take care of ourselves. So Jesus is saying, if you're going to witness to me, you're going to be persecuted. You're going to have to depend upon me and me alone. So your relinquishment to me is absolutely necessary to carry this out. And the way that you live the witness to it, and you understand the witness to it, because the other side of it is it's easy when we witness to the gospel to get jaded, to get to watch the world not living out the gospel the way that Christ wants the gospel to live, and the people that we are ministering to are not doing it either, and we're ministering to them. So there's a lot of people that go through steps of disillusionment and disappointment and become actually jaded in response to the gospel. And that's the danger too that Jesus talks about. If you take this on and you don't take it on with the Spirit, the Holy Spirit leading you, you're going to be the victim and actually wind up in the other column. And you can imagine that if I'm a defender of the gospel and I wind up being angry and upset and jaded and oppressive to the very thought of the people that I'm called to minister to, then I have become them. I'm the one who needs saving at that point. So there's the risk that's in here is what the relinquishment that James talked about in 4, what you need to have, what we need to have this devotion over to God, utter dependence. And now he moves into that saying, okay, so these are the people that I'm talking to here, but don't forget you people that aren't necessarily going to be in front row because you know that you need to be saved because you got all that money. You're well off. You're happy. You've got all the stuff you need and more, and you don't even think about money because you have so much of it. You just have it. You know, you need something, you go buy it. So he attacks these people in the same way we had the witness in Matthew's gospel of the rich young man, right? The rich young ruler that comes to Jesus and says, I've done everything. And he was honest. He wasn't a braggart. He said, I have lived a life and I'm doing everything that I should be doing. In fact, I'm doing more. And he seems to be very sincere about what he's doing. And Jesus says, yes, you're doing all the right things. That's great. There's only one thing that you need to do. And he says, I want you to go sell everything and follow me. And of course, we all know the answer. The rich young ruler is dejected and he takes his stuff and he leaves because he's not, he expected to have another task for himself to do that would be that where his wealth or his influence would help make happen. So using his strengths to make the ministry go forward. And so when Jesus says the task I need to give you is the task for you, it's not the task for somebody else, and it's to sell everything and to follow me, and he can't do that. So James is picking up on it here, and he's saying this terrible description, right? Mine says, now listen, you rich people, weep and wail because of the misery that is coming to you. What does your verse say there, Sharon? That first verse of 5.
The first verse?
Yeah.
I mean, look here, you rich people, weep and groan with anguish because of all the terrible troubles ahead of you.
Yes. Okay. So it's very close. Yep. What about read 2, will you?
Your wealth is rotting away and your fine clothes are moth-eaten rags.
Yep. Yep. And 3?
Your gold and silver are corroded. The very wealth you are counting on will eat away your flesh like fire. Let me keep going.
Does it end there?
What?
4, verse 3.
The corroded treasure you've hoarded will testify against you on the day of judgment. It ends there.
Yep. Okay. So what James is doing, if you're a rich person, I imagine you hear this, and so you go running into your hall closet and you take a look, and there's no moths in there. Go down the floor, open the safe, and all your money's there. It's not rotting away. Nothing's corroded. It's not what it is. But of course, we know what James is talking about is that the effect on the self is a corrupting influence. It is a broken and destructive influence that comes back to us. So the rich person doesn't even know that what they have is corrupted and disgusting. You know, the moths have had it, it's eaten, it's moth-eaten, the silver is eroded and corroded, and they testify against it because it's the wealth itself that is holding the person back from moving forward in their spiritual life and their understanding. So
Good, I'll get you another one.
Mine continues with, look, the wages you failed to pay the workmen who mowed your field are crying out against you. The cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord Almighty. You have lived in earth in luxury and indulgence. You have fatted yourselves in the day of slaughter. You have condemned and murdered innocent men who were not opposing you.
Get headphones like that kid.
So really, both guns blazing here. And we all understand, I think, that what he's talking about here is the abuse of the rich person the rich
I'm not
getting
getting
richer.
any of this.
You know, I've got
I'm
my
not sure
system.
what's-
I've got my system to continue to get richer, and I'm not sharing that the prosperity with those who should be who I should be looking after. There's a couple of things that are interesting about this, and that is that this whole beginning of 5 is, as we read it, a statement of judgment. It's an absolute judgment from start to finish. And in this word here, what does yours say? Your translation gets this absolutely right. Read 4b. Mine starts the cries of the harvester.
Cries of those who harvest your fields have reached the ears of the Lord of heaven's armies.
Yes, so cool. Okay, so this word in the Greek is Sabaoth. If you see Sabaoth, sometimes people think that means Sabbath, and it's not. It's not that. Sabaoth is basically hosts, and the word hosts here in the Greek is a military term. So the Lord of hosts is really talking about or making akin the Lord as a military leader. And again, what's yours say, Sharon? The armies of heaven, is that right?
Yeah, the ears of the Lord of heaven's armies.
Heaven's army. So that's right in there. That's a great translation. Mine does not have it. Mine just says Lord Almighty. So
Mine says Lord of Hosts.
Lord of hosts. Yeah.
Mine has Lord of Armies.
Lord of armies. Fantastic. That's great. So that's much closer to the image that we should have. I mean, we don't like to think that there's this military image that's popping up in scripture. And it's quite possible that with the NIV that they would eliminate that because it's kind of, tetchy and offensive, and you don't want to put the Lord into the same category as an army. But it's in the scripture a lot. It's frequently changed to be Almighty or something like that. But the word host is specifically used in the Greek to represent army troops. So this is
onward Christian soldiers. I mean,
right.
There's a lot of that.
Which, by the way, just as everybody knows, the one of the chief editors of the new hymnal, I knew him very well, and he would tell the story that there was a massive movement to remove onward Christian soldiers from the hymnal. And they did. They left it out of the first revision. And only after there was another massive movement to put it back in, did they put it back in the hymnal. But that whole thing, the first movement to get it taken out was because they said it's offensive to think of God as a God of violence, of armies, and to have these images of an army and of this power and this kind of authority is just unchristian, and so we wanted to take it out. So it's a trend. I've got me looking at my NIV right here, so it's just through and through and through. I've checked it. It's changed every time that word is up. It just puts the word Almighty in. It takes that image away completely.
Sorry, I think we were talking about this earlier. People imagine God is the God of love, and that's true, but he's also, love doesn't mean without discipline.
Right, exactly. Yep.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's the idea that exactly that, and that people have God begins to reflect my sensitivities or my sensibilities. So I don't think it's this way, and since I don't think it's this way, it can't be. God can't do it that way. And I'm just amazed that the translations are so in certain places are so quick to kind of affirm that. Change a word so easily defined word, not a word that's on the fence. This is a word that's plain and simple. The Lord of heaven's armies, or Lord of the armies. Okay, so anyway, moving on. So we've got you have been condemned for the murder of innocent men who are not opposing you. What does yours say, Sharon? That's verse 6.
6. You've condemned and killed innocent people who do not resist you.
So I don't think the rich young ruler would agree with that, do you? Well, he didn't seem like a murderer to me in the gospel. But what James is saying here is that you don't know the depth of the destruction that you wrought or that you are causing in the lives of the people that you're cheating. So your workers can't afford medical treatment. Your workers are ostracized. They can't come into town. They can't go to the drugstore. They can't go to the doctor. So simple things like a cold turns into pneumonia, and then you have a wife or a child or a husband dying who could have been saved if you had just paid this person enough or cared for them enough to get them a medical treatment. So James is saying this is happening with the rich people. So the same type of neglect and abuse back that we have talked about today was happening as always happened.
Mine has a little bit of a different flavor to it. The last sentence in mine says, "You have condemned, you have murdered the righteous one. He offers you no resistance." So to me, that really speaks to Jesus being condemned in his trial and Jesus being killed on the cross, and he offered no resistance. So in looking at that, to me, it feels like it kind of turns it to everything that we do, that we're doing to other people, we're also doing to Jesus.
Absolutely.
And he accepted that and paid that for us. But what gravity, because we're doing that to Jesus, not just to someone else.
That's
and that
sort of
goes-
sort of the flip side of if you give somebody your clothes, your coat, or if you feed somebody, you do the same thing to me.
Yes.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, so the word in the Greek word that you're talking about there for just, and you said just or righteous?
Righteous one.
Righteous one. So this is
You have murdered the righteous one. He
Right.
offers you no resistance.
So in my translation, that's innocent.
Mm.
And in the Greek, it is it's
New King,
it's just. So the just.
yeah, the New King James, it says it's the just.
Okay. So that is diakios, which is those who are righteous or are living righteously. So it sounds like, Sue, your translation is making it as a not plural, but singular.
Yes.
Yes. So that would be an interesting investigation into the translation, because the word itself is plural.
Hmm.
So
Well, it's-
look back, if we look at it from the context of the farming,
Mhm.
and those, then it makes more sense that there are those who are those who are serving, those
Well, and
servants.
it does talk about it's parallel to yours the whole way down.
Mhm.
Behold, the wages you withheld from the workers who
Right.
harvested your fields are crying aloud, and the cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord of hosts. But then later it says, you have condemned, semicolon, you have murdered the righteous one.
Yeah.
He offers you no resistance.
Yeah. And I think what Steve said is exactly right. That's Jesus saying, when did you feed me? When did you clothe me? When did you
Right.
take care of me? And every one that you did or didn't do is me.
Mhm.
Right.
So
It-
if I could ask, where it says you have condemned, it's obviously meaning they condemned their people who they murdered the righteous, but could it also be they condemned themselves to hell?
Well, I think the answer is yes. I think he is saying that you have condemned yourself by your behavior, but but the person that he's talking to is certainly not righteous.
Mm-hmm.
Well, New King James seems to want it both ways. Says you have murdered the just, and he does not resist you.
Okay.
So that's
Wow.
very similar.
So it's sort of both
Right.
plural and singular.
So we've
Yeah.
got so in that it looks like they are James. If you take that one, let's see, where's it just and he. So this is
My version says
yeah.
condemn the innocent.
Yeah. So actually, that is correct. I've looked beyond the that one, the beginning of 6 in the Greek, And it does, it carries the first half of that sentence is plural, the second half is singular.
Yes.
So it's just what Steve said. It's both ways. So if that's from James, James is continuing to call your attention to the people that you actually have condemned or hurt by your neglect and by your abuse, but that those people are represented in the righteous one, in the
Yeah.
Christ. So the condemnation is bigger than you just ignored this person whose wife died of pneumonia, because now you're talking about the person of Christ represented in that person. Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Way to dig. Love it. All right. Who wants to read 7 through 12?
I'll do it.
You go.
Therefore, brothers and sisters, be patient until the Lord's coming. See how the farmer waits for the precious fruit of the earth and is patient with it until it receives the early and late rains. You also must be patient. Strengthen your hearts, because the Lord's coming is near. Brothers and sisters, do not complain about one another, so that you will not be judged. Look, the judge stands at the door. Brothers and sisters, take the prophets who spoke in the Lord's name as an example of suffering and patience. See, we count as blessed those who have endured. You have heard of Job's endurance and have seen the outcome the Lord brought about. The Lord is compassionate and merciful.
You can keep going.
Oh, sorry.
Just
Above all, my brothers and sisters, do not swear, either by heaven or by earth, or with any other oath, but let your yes mean yes and your no mean no, so that you
Okay.
won't fall under judgment.
Cool. All right. So this has got touchstones all over, and I could have grabbed a half a dozen of them, but I just grabbed one. We started off with this word that continues to be, and if anybody has a different word, please shout it out. It's the word patient.
That's what it says.
Does everybody have patient? Okay, so that is the translation. It's patient, and we have it repeated over and over again in here. The patient, then brothers, see how the farmer waits. Waits is just a synonym for patient. For the yield is patient for the land to yield its valuable crop. How patient is the farmer in the autumn and the spring rains. You too must be patient and stand firm. So that connection to the patient and stand firm does not mean that you're patient and you become melancholic about it. You know how sometimes when you're waiting for something so long, you feel like you don't care. It's just going to happen whenever it happens, and you kind of get worn out. Being patient wears us out. So this is an instruction that, number one, you have to be patient. You can't not be patient. You must be patient because it's going to take time. But you also have to remain strong. And then we're taken back again to the 4th chapter, where he says that the only way you can be strong is if you are absolutely dependent upon Christ. That your strength will flounder, will wear out. You'll wear yourself out, just like it will wear us out. I've been worn out by being patient myself in the past. But here you have to stay strong. So to stay strong, you have to be renewing your devotion to Christ, renewing your dependence on Christ. And the assurance here is that the thing is coming. The farmer knows that that these crops are going to grow. The farmer knows that the spring rains are going to come. The farmer knows this, and you can't change what's going to happen. So waits for these things patiently. So there is a call to be the person who is witnessing and working, but there is also a call to relinquish and know that I am not the one in charge. That God is doing what God does, and I just have to wait for that to be the case in my life, or the case in the people's lives that I'm working with. So, I don't know if you have ever done this. I certainly have done this. That the prayer of when, oh when, I want this thing to happen for myself or for the people that I'm praying for, and my prayer after waiting for such a long time is asking God when this is going to happen. Why hasn't happened yet is really the question. When, oh Lord, is really just me saying I'm tired of it not happening. So when is it? Come on now. It's past time. I need to get this ball moving along. And this just flies in the face of this and says here at the end of verse 8, because the Lord is coming. You know, again, as the farmer knows this is happening, he's saying, okay, you need to know and remember this is happening. So this is what you're called to do for yourself or for others is not based on your idea or your strength to carry it through. It's based on the fact that the Lord is coming. And if you keep that as your goal, as what's looming before you, then the inspiration as well as your dependence upon that will be the strength that you need to carry on, to be patient. Don't grumble against each other, mine says, or the judge is standing at the door. Okay, so just as a jump on that. So in 2 Corinthians, Paul says, for we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that each one may receive what is due them. For the things done while in the body, whether good or bad, are to be judged. Right? So now that comes from the gospel. Jesus, comes to judge. What did you say?
Well, mine, I think it's rather interesting. In mine, the word judge is capitalized.
Okay.
Yeah. That's pretty obvious who that judge is.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. It's the important, both for the person of Christ as the judge, and the judgment that Christ brings for us. What does that mean for us? Who are we? This is again back to the rich young ruler. Jesus said you're only missing one thing. If you're going to be judged on something, it's going to be this one thing. So here I'm going to save you. Sell it all and follow me.
From what I got from that section, it's making me feel like a child, like don't go entertain yourself. Stop asking like, are we there yet? Like read a book in the car, and it's like stop tattling to mommy, that little Timmy like had his eyes open during prayer, like he can come back at you like, well, you did too, and we're all gonna be judged for that.
Yeah.
Don't live as if Christ will never come.
Exactly. And aren't we now talking about the maidens, the virgins trimming their wicks, right? They lived like the bridegroom was never going to come. They didn't prepare. They didn't get ready. They weren't set. And then the bridegroom came and they weren't ready. And by the end of the night, everybody's in the party and they're out in the street with gnashing teeth in the darkness. Because they just lived like it didn't matter, lived like it wasn't going to happen. And remember Jesus saying, the Lord comes like a thief in the night. If you don't live your life on the edge of the reality that Christ is coming to you, then you're going to live your life on the edge of the precipice that leads to someplace else, because you can't have it both ways. So James, again, just bringing this back to the reader's attention, need to have all these things in mind and in heart while we're embarking upon this relationship and taking on this responsibility not just for ourselves, but for the other. Okay, let's see. Where am I? Where are we going here? You read to the grumbling. Okay. All right. No. Okay. You read through. All right. I was standing at the door, brother. All right. The example of patience. So he gets into this word again. The example of patience. He calls back to the Old Testament. So not everywhere in the New Testament do you have the New Testament writers very specifically referring to the Old Testament. So he's very specifically calling out the prophets of old as these people of patience that we need to look back to as an inspiration, that they were in direct relationship. That's the other side of it. And I say, okay, so Elijah was patient. So, Elisha was patient. So we have these different examples of the different prophets. Ezekiel is patient, but part of the example of them being patient is that they are in direct contact with God, and that God is not a question mark to them. So the patience that they're called, that they are to endure, is based on the palpable reality of God in their life. So he's saying, this is to be your guide. This is to be an example to you of your life. If you're living like the prophet, you're living like a person who is, the reality of God is right here. It's a concrete truth. It's not in any way, shape, or form a question or out of mind. Prophets were never out of mind with God. Didn't have it. And to throw a name at it, he goes to Job. This is so wonderful, right? As you know, we consider blessed those who have persevered. You have heard of Job's perseverance and have seen what the Lord finally brought about. The Lord is full of compassion and mercy. This is the only place in the New Testament that mentions Job. This is it. Nobody else talks about poor Job. But he holds Job up as this person of inspiration specifically because of Job's patience. I mean, we all know the story of Job, right? Poor guy. And all he went through, and the witness of Job, and by the way, I think we did this Bible study years ago. The witness of Job is a very sophisticated person, witness in the scripture. Very, very sophisticated, much more sophisticated than the simple one-dimensional picture that we oftentimes hear him represented by. But here, with the just referring to the patience, not to everything else, because we know the story, is that the one place where he is lauded by God is the place where he never gives up. For all the things that were heaped upon him, and for his own failings that happen very graphically at the end of the book of Job, he still believes. He's still devoted. No matter what's happening to him, he still turns back to God over and over and over, 100%. Even when he's angry and yelling at God, he's angry and yells at God, but he's yelling at God. He's never angry and saying, well, if this stuff is happening, and well, maybe there is no God. Maybe there's really nobody out there, and this is just happening to me because, just these things happen. The witness of Job is not that. The witness of Job is patience and absolute relinquishment, dependence on God, absolute and utter living into the reality of God in his life. Finding his ailments met by the reality of God, no matter how I'm living. I'm in pain, I'm in suffering. It's a horrible existence. And yet I know for a fact that this is the God of mercy, love, and grace, and that God is still accompanying me in this place of terror. I'm still in terror, but I still know that God is here. And I'm still dedicated and devoted to that God. So this is the witness of Job that James holds up. And I love at the end, we say this, right? Paul talks about this too, is above all, brothers, don't swear. So he was living during a time, as Paul was living during a time, when people would say, and we've done this too, I've seen people do this, that they want to add a little emphasis to their word, and so they swear on it. And this is less in our time, which is great, and more in the last probably 30 years, where people would put a swear on things and say, I swear, this is the way it is. I think people swore more on things when our names meant more. When to be who we are actually meant more than who we are today. So, but he's saying he lived during a time when that was a big deal. When people would swear about it, and if they swore about it, then it must be true, it must be right. And he's saying it's an abuse. And people were covering their sin or covering their corruption in the other person's naivete and taking advantage of them even in that. So he's saying, even if you're right, even if you are not the abuser, don't swear, because the practice has been abused, it's corrupted. And you don't need to do it anyway. There's no point to it. There's no purpose to it. Saying yes, if the answer is really yes, then saying yes is enough. If you're questioned on it, you're going to be questioned on it whether you swear or not. Sharon?
And when people who profess to be Christians do that, then other people won't believe them when they're ministering to.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been turned around. It's backwards now. It's been so twisted over time. So this is just a good practice. Yes, yes, and no, no will be enough. You're done. Don't do anymore. Okay, we're almost there, and I'm actually excited because we actually have taken the time. So who wants to read 13 to the end?
I will.
Okay.
Is anyone among you suffering? Let him pray. Is anyone cheerful? Let him sing psalms. Is anyone sick? Let him call for the elders of the church and let them pray over him, anointing him with oil in the name of the Lord. And the prayer of faith will save the sick, and the Lord will raise him up. And if he has committed sins, he will be forgiven. Confess your trespasses to one another and pray for one another that you may be healed. The effective, fervent prayer of a righteous man avails much. Elijah was a man with a nature like ours, and he prayed earnestly that it would not rain, and it did not rain on the land for 3 years and 6 months. And he prayed again, and the heaven gave rain, and the earth produced its fruit. Brethren, if anyone among you wanders from the truth and someone turns him back, let him know that he who turns a sinner from the error of his ways will save a soul from death and cover a multitude of sins.
Okay. All right, so we've got so much going on in this little end, and now with that last line, you might start to see the connection to the video that I played at the beginning. We have, if any of you, Steve's words were different. Mine says, are any of you in trouble? Or is anyone happy? And so it says, if you're in trouble, you should pray. And if you're happy, you should sing songs of praise. So those two is what I've got. Is anyone sick? He should call the elders of the church to pray over him and anoint him with oil in the name of the Lord. All right, so
This is it.
let's just take a quick look at that.
That's it.
There is
So
a double
that's what this is
event
referring
happening.
to.
Double event happening in this line. So do you notice something that's assumed right away in this verse 14? It's so blatant, you probably won't get it because it's just right there. It's not hidden. And that is,
Well, the
10,
church
12.
is, the church has structure now. It
yeah,
has presbyters.
yeah. So
It
it's
is,
just
yeah.
assumed that you're in church. If anyone's sick, you should call the church. Well, you got to be in the church to call the church. So it's just assumed that the people that he's talking to, the people that are in need, are believing. They're going to church. They're church people. Right? If anyone is sick, he should call the elders of the church and pray over him and anoint him. So who should call? He should call.
Yeah, the sick
I think it's wonderful when people say John is sick, and can you pray for John? And or Susie is Susan John, sorry. And so Trudy is sick. You should pray for. Can you go visit Trudy? It's sad because Trudy doesn't call. Trudy's not asking for prayer. Trudy's not asking for people to come over and pray. And here we have the same thing. He's echoing what Jesus is saying. Jesus is saying, you need to be the one that's praying. You need to be the one who's asking for the help. You need to be the one seeking after the blessing, not relying upon other people to figure it out and come to you. It has to be you, your effort, your want, your desire. He should call the elders of the church and pray over him and anoint him with oil in the name of the Lord. Now, this word anoint is aleipha. And this word is a wonderful word. There are two words for anoint. This word has two meanings. It is not just the religious anointing, like you have David was anointed to become the king. Okay? This word, it has a medicinal application to it, and actually has a longer definition of rubbing, massaging the person with oil. So what they're saying is that you should call the elders of the church to pray over him and provide medical care, because this was believed to be the medical care of the day, to rub the person with oil, to anoint them, to pray to God to heal them, but then to give them medical care. So it's not just looking for, this is the God who says we said God helps those who help themselves. So he's saying this is what the church needs to do. It's not just providing spiritual help. It's tangible help. It's the real help. Earthly help. Right.
I have a question or a
Yeah.
comment.
Mhm.
The idea that the person who needs the help is the one to call,
Mm-hmm.
does that not go back to the idea that that person believes that there is help and that they can get help and that it's possible.
Absolutely.
And if that person does not believe, it doesn't matter how many people pray over him.
Yeah.
The person himself will not believe in the help.
Yeah, absolutely.
That there's no help for a person who doesn't believe in that sense. Jesus's miracles only happened among people who believed.
Yeah. Yep.
I actually took it a little bit differently. You know the story of the man whose area is flooded and he climbs on his roof and a raft, a boat, and a helicopter gets sent by and he doesn't take any of it and he gets to heaven. He's like, God, why didn't you help me? He's like, I sent a raft, a boat, and a helicopter. You have to help yourself, you know?
Right. Yeah.
And that's not to say God won't help you, but you have to, you know,
You have to
hit the
accept it.
ground running.
Right. You have to be a part of it. You can't, we're not called to be spectators.
Mhm.
We're called to be the active participants doing the work and turning to God ourselves. I mean, if this is who we are before this in this chapter, devoted to God, utterly dependent upon God, seeking God in our place of patience, knowing that only God can sustain us, having God to be our guide and our director, then we would be calling to God. We would not be calling to God. When I was in Kilmarnock, I got a call from, in fact, I got 2 calls. The first call I couldn't understand at all. It was raspy and words I could not, and then it hung up. And about 10 minutes later, the phone rang again, and I heard all this shuffling around the phone, and I heard one voice in the background, and then I held the phone. I'm like, hello, 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 and I finally hear that same raspy voice start to talk again. This time I could barely make him out, and it was simply this man saying, "Come and pray for me." It was it. I'm thinking, where are you? I was saying that, where are you? And he just kept saying, come and pray for me. And then the phone went away and the lady came on and she said, can you come over and pray for, I can't remember his name now. He needs you to pray for him. And I said, yeah, give me the address. So he gave me the address. I drove across the Northern Neck and went to this man's house who was dying in his house. And she said, he wanted to be the one to ask for prayer. He wanted to talk to the priest and say he needed to be prayed for and wanted the person to come and pray for him. And I found out later on that he was a priest. So he was doing exactly what he knew he needed to do. He didn't tell his caregiver to call and get someone to come over. He needed to be that person who said, I want you to come and pray for me. He's right in James, right? Living out the scripture. So beautiful witness. I didn't connect the two at the time, but later on I did. I'm like, oh, that was what a witness he was, and he died 3 days later. So I only got to visit him. In fact, I was going back to visit him the second time when I got the word that he had died. Okay, so we have this assumption that the church is there. We have this the tangible reality of anointing the person with the oil and calling on God's anointing, God's healing. But we also have the medicinal reality, providing for the person the medical help that they might need. All right, prayer offered in faith will make the sick forgiven. And okay, what was the one here? Oh yes, okay. If he has sinned, okay. So who read? Who was that?
Jay?
It was Steve. Steve, read
Steve.
15 for me.
15.
Yep.
And the prayer of faith will save the sick, and the Lord will raise him up. And
Yes.
if he has committed sins, he will be forgiven.
So now I love the NIV, but I could just like throw it over my shoulder right now because this is what it says. And the prayer offered in faith will make the sick person well. That's not the word at all. Okay, the word is sozo in the Greek, and it's not well, it's saved. Just like what Steve's translation is. This is not talking about the physical healing of the person. It's talking about the salvation of the person. The word saved is also the same word saved is used over and over in the Gospels. This Malachi, I've gone to the wrong place. And one place is, oh no, my thing came out. I pulled it out. I was dwiddling with my fingers and I pulled out the reference. But this is one of the references Jesus I just pulled out because there are many in the gospel where Jesus was saying that the action that he's taking, the action that you're taking is going to save you. So he's not talking about my sickness. He's talking about the spiritual reality of the person's life. And then continues on with that. You can see the connection where in Steve's, not in mine, where he says, oops,
The Lord will raise him up.
the Lord will raise him up, right? So you could say that that is the physical raising up of the person out of the bed, but that's not what this is about. This is about the spiritual welfare, the everlasting life of that individual, calling on the Lord, calling in the church for the church gathered. So sad. Okay. Elijah, talked about Elijah. I already talked about Elijah a little bit as that prophet you might think about. This thing, he prayed earnestly that it would not rain, and it didn't rain for 3 years. If you remember right, the reason why he did that is because the people were faithless. They turned away from God. They were worshiping Baal, and they were praying to Baal to make rain, because there was a drought, and they needed Baal to give them water so that their crops would grow. And so God said, no. I'm going to show you that you're praying to, a rock. You're praying to nothing. So he had Elijah pray. So the people knew that Elijah prayed. So it was the God Yahweh against Baal. And you got all these people. Now this is like the big battle, right? On the top of the hill. So he's saying all these people praying to Baal to make it rain. And you got one man praying to God, to Yahweh, that doesn't rain, and it doesn't rain. So there's this witness of faith, absolute faith in the reality that God is going to do this. There's the reality of our prayers is we are supposed to, we should be looking at our prayers, not as in any way, shape, or form as a question, but as an answer. I'm praying for this thing. I'm praying for God's providence and God's presence in the midst of whatever it is I'm praying for. And what I'm getting is God's providence and God's presence. There's no question about it. So I'm not entering into a prayer going, oh, I'm praying and I hope this happens. We've come at it the wrong way. Okay, so we got Elijah produce the crops. My brothers, if one of you should wander from the truth, someone should bring him back. Remember this, whoever turns a sinner from an error of his way will save him from death, right? That's damnation, and cover a multitude of sins. So you may see now the connection to the video. So you've got Jelly Roll saying, only pray, he's a paper mache Christian, right? He only prays. I love Will heard it. He was passing by before we got together, and the one line where he says, I only pray when I haven't got a prayer. And Will's like, what is that? And I said, well, back in the day, we used to say, I haven't got a prayer, when it meant this isn't going to work. Like someone say, are you going to make it? And I say, I haven't got a prayer. Like, I'm never going to make it. Never going to get there. It's not going to work. Not going to happen. And I think that's what he's saying in here. I only pray when I haven't got a prayer. So which means he doesn't believe his prayers. I'm praying for something that's never going to happen. I've got that set to start with. So here at the end, it's the commissioning. It's saying, this is a person who is in real need of a witness, need of a friend, need of a spiritual partner, need of an inspiration, and taking the time and spending the time with that person to build them up in the faith, to show them the face of God, to hold them into the arms of Christ, to give them that inspiration that they need is literally going to save their life.
Well, and
Literally.
mine says, whoever brings back a sinner from the error of his way will save his soul from death.
Yeah.
Not just save him from death, but save
Right.
his soul from death.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
will cover a multitude of sins.
Yep. So that's our job.
Well,
All of this. Yep. Good, Steve.
I think I'm confused because mine says, and if he has committed sins, he will be forgiven.
Yeah.
Confess your trespasses to one another and pray for one another that you may be healed. So that this sort of indicates
Mhm.
that it's coming from the individual. If the individual has committed sins, he'll be forgiven. Not that whoever brings somebody back from sin will save them, or I don't know. Maybe I'm seeing a distinction without a difference.
Well,
My-
God saves the person from death. God saves the person's soul from death, but it's through the action of the person that turned them back to God,
Right.
right?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
so it's not the individual who's actually that powerful person.
Yep.
Although it says like Elijah was powerful in his relationship to God.
Mhm.
That's the thing. It's the relationship, and through the person that turns the sinner back toward God, then God is able to save that person because they've turned back to God,
Yeah.
and they're now looking at God and in the presence of God.
Yes. So it's the partnership. It's the action of the person who, because he starts off, brethren, if any of you do err from the truth, and one, if any do err from the truth, this is the Greek, so it's kind of rough. If any of you do err from the truth, and one convert him. So they're talking about the person who's gone away, and then the other person who's come to save them, to convert them, to bring them back. Let him know that he which covereth the sin and the error, his way shall save a soul from death and shall hide a multitude of sins. So it is what's happening to the individual is being saved from death and hiding a multitude of sins, but it doesn't happen with the person alone. It happens with the brethren ministering and witnessing to this person to bring them back from the place where they have lost their faith or have erred and are going down the primrose path. And if you leave them alone, they're going to keep on going that way. They think they've got it, and they're off in the toolies. So if the church just stands by, if the brethren just stand by and watch and go, oh yeah, him, her, they, and they're gone, then we're obviously not living up to the instruction that Christ has given us. And then this commissioning, this witness that we have from James as well. And this all fits into the idea of works, right? Remember, we started off saying that Luther hated this book because it would talk about works and how you do stuff. But this is what we do. This is an extension of. Can you imagine being a carpenter? I've got my degree. I'm a carpenter now, and I can do all this stuff. I can put up cabinets and I can build things and I can do all this wonderful stuff, and then I don't do anything. You come over to my house and I point to it on the wall. Look what I can do. I got that diploma. I can do this stuff. Well, why'd you get it? Aren't you working? Aren't you going to go work? So we've been called to be Christians. We've been called to be in the faith, to grow in the faith, and that is to do the work of the faith. It's to do the work of the Spirit. It's not one over the other. It's one and the other. They're together. Luther got kind of crazy and separated them, thought that's what he was saying. It's not. It's the two. If you have faith, you're going to have works because they're together. The faith is in me. The works are coming out of me to get the thing done. So, all right. Well, this was fun. I love doing this stuff. And James, and looking back at the Hebrew, or at the Greek rather, more and more is making me want to get another Bible and start doing that other one. And I truly love this NIV, and I have several of them that I've written copious notes up and down and backwards, but I'm going to think I have to go to a different one. We shall see. Maybe another Bible in my near future. So we've run out of time. It's we run over. I see it's 8:36. That was a surprise to me. It took longer than I thought, but it's great. So thank you for that. Thank you for the time. Now we just need to decide. We can't do it tonight. Let's get back together next week to make this to put a pin in it. What we're going to study next. And we had two main ideas coming out. The first idea that led us to James was the idea of doing James and then going into Hebrews, which is much longer, and a very deep read as well. And then last week, I can't remember, it may have been Steve, somebody came up with the idea and said, let's just keep going through the letters. Well, let's keep going through the pastoral epistles because they're so short. I mean, you can do easily maybe 2 pastoral epistles in one night and move through them. And then we can go on to Hebrews. And this way we'll have all of these pastoral epistles we'll just have done when mostly we don't do anything with them. I mean, they're not even read in the lectionary. You don't even hear them in church. So,
Sounds like a good idea.
yeah.
I like that idea.
Whoa. All right. What we can do, I can, if you want to, I can put together, it's just starting off. I mean, we're right here in Peter. We can just keep going to the next one, the next one, the next one. So I tell you what, let's just, so we don't lose a day, let's look at coming together next week, and we're going to go straight into the next book.
The first letter of Peter.
Yes,
Good.
first letter of Peter. And that's where we'll spend our time that night and discuss and decide for sure that we want to just keep going from 1 Peter to 2 Peter to 3 Peter, and then we can get into John if we want to, but we'll decide that next week on for sure. But we will hit
Okay,
1
good.
Peter next week. How's that sound?
Okay, good.
Sounds
All right.
good.
So fantastic. All right, guys. Wonderful to be with you as always. Highlight of my nights during the week is this night right here. So I pray that you all have a wonderful rest, wonderful sleep, and a refreshing day tomorrow. Sue, continued safe drives, a wonderful time. Give Noelle my love and tell her,
Well, thank you.
yeah, absolutely. Be
right.
well. Take care, everybody. Have a great night.
All right.
Have a good
Bye.
night.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.